that happen. Something here today, and we have to get up early. And I'm kind of speaking to, but you'll wake up when our speakers are speaking. I want to be, I'll try to be brief, but there's a lot of really important people here today, guests that I've invited. So I want to honor all of you that are here. First of all, how many of you are here for the first time? Just raise your hands. Okay, good. Thank you. Many other great interfaith council events that you will be a part of now that we're coming out of COVID. There's a lot of new things happening. Next, I want all current and past board members and presidents of NYC, please stand. Dedication will not be there for you, and we are on year number 40 of interfaith. Yeah. Okay, I've been personally involved with NYC for about 20 years, and I've watched our programs evolve over those years. Our mission statement is to celebrate faith, advocate justice, and build community. Our board members have a variety of community engagements that are important to them and have been their priorities. Examples might be climate change and immigrant rights. For me, diversity, inclusion, equity, and social justice have emerged as my passion as part of my speech. At my two tables, my guests here are a number of invited guests, people that are engaged in the community. Caesar, great hand. Caesar, thank you for being the voice of the Asian American community, as well as speaking out on behalf of people of color that have had disproportionate encounters with local law enforcement. You led a community forum in Marin City, hosted by Reverend William Tompkins, and let people tell their experiences, and we listen. Thank you, Caesar. As some of you may recall, in October of 2021, Congregation Kol Shofar and Marin Interfaith Council co-sponsored a panel discussion standing up for housing justice in Marin City. This panel discussion included voice, McNamara, was moderated by the Reverend Scott Clark, First Presbyterian of San Antonio. There are a number of guests that were involved in the Golden Gate Village revitalization plan, including Royce McNamara and Ann Devereaux Rosenfeld. We volunteer every Monday for over a year. They have strategized, written letters, attended meetings, and spoken up, and have been a great example of being effective agents of change. Also present are Sarah Hansen from the Marin Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Thank you for your dedication and engagement. Additionally, most of the friends of Golden Gate Village were also advocates for Project Hunki in Marksburg, as was Marin Interfaith board members, speaking up on behalf of our homeless population, despite loud protests from local residents. Finally, we have had the support of our Marin County supervisors, one who's present today, Supervisor Stephanie Pierce. In an independent journal editorial about Golden Gate Village, she stated, quote, "We are going to figure it out. We are going to get it done." And regarding Project Hunki, despite the loud protests, she said, quote, "We care for our children and we care for those who need help. We need to do both. We can't just do one half of the equation." Thank you so much. So a few more thanks are in order for all of our donors and supporters. MIC would not exist without you. With everyone who has been a financial supporter, please stand. Thank you to the San Francisco Foundation Space Program for their support. And special thanks to the Marin Community Foundation for its continued support. We are glad to have Don Jen. Foundation's Program Director for Education is here with us today. Thank you, Don. At the conclusion of this gathering, we have heard from our three wonderful speakers. If you are inspired today to donate, there are donation envelopes on the table, or you can use the QR code on the program to make a donation. In closing, all of you present today, most of you from different faith traditions, some of you unchurched but engaged, would probably say that when we all have the problem with this, to heal the world. In Judaism, this is known as tikkun olam. Also, remember the simple mantra. This is something that we've been for years. Show up, stand up, and speak out for those whose voices are not being heard. Thank you for your good works. Thank you for your compassion, open hearts, and kindness. In Buddhism, this is called metta. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, Mark. I think you can see why I absolutely adore Mark. I'm so grateful to have this on our board president. You're amazing, Mark. Thank you so much. So as Mark mentioned, this is our 40th anniversary year, where Annual Interfaith Council is a respectful collaborative with the threefold mission that Mark mentioned, to celebrate faith, events like this, advocate justice, several of the ways that Mark mentioned, and to build community. We do that in many ways. One way you may have seen on the way in, a poster for Loveless Marin, which Rabbi Leider helped us found a few years ago, which counters hate and bias, with a campaign that promotes radical inclusion by highlighting stories, particularly from persons in marginalized community. Loveless Marin promotes a county where everyone is welcome and thrives. We also promote inclusive community through monthly meditations, featuring a different faith leader each month, gatherings for religious leaders, an annual fall event highlighting visionary work in our community for justice. And this year we'll also be wrapping in our 40th anniversary celebration with that fall event. We're also ongoing small groups on numerous different topics and issues, including addressing climate change. We have 2 groups focused on that. We have our network of accompanying congregations that's facilitated by my co-worker, Reverend Lynn Olden Robinette. And that provides tangible support to struggling immigrant families, refugees, and asylum seekers. And we're also the fiscal sponsor for the Street Chaplaincy. Executive Director Nick Morris is here, and which provides compassionate spiritual care to the unhoused and builds community between homeless persons and non-homeless persons. So these are just a few examples of MIC's mission in action. And of course, by joining us here today, you're part of that mission in action. So thank you to each of you for being here today, taking a stand for justice, for unity, and for a way forward in our world to make it more whole. Thank you for being here. Looking ahead, MIC will be offering more opportunities for conversations like we're having today, new educational and meditation events, a new drop-in group specifically for religious leaders. Many more offerings like that will be coming. So if you're not already signed up for our twice monthly e-newsletter, there's a sign-up sheet on your table. And that's really the best way to stay engaged and stay informed. So feel free to sign up for that. And together today, we are not only reunited in person, but we're making a spiritual statement, political statement, a heart statement, that there's a different way that our world can be. There's a different way that our community can be. So many of you are already living this day in and day out by the work we do in the community. Gathering together, we have an energy that we're cultivating today that we believe we are the way forward. And those with us of like mind and like heart are the way forward. So thank you for joining today. Get some nourishment in body and soul from our speakers, from each other, as we carry this forward for that vision. You are MIC, and together we'll make a world where everyone thrives and knows that they are fully welcome. So in that spirit, we're going to turn our attention now to hear three distinct perspectives. I invite you to open your hearts and minds to receive what is familiar and comforting, and to hold a gentle openness, what is new or unfamiliar, or that might challenge you. That's why we're here, to listen to each other with deep respect. And if anything you hear leads to a little tightness in your stomach or chest, that's normal. It's our human way of dealing with the unfamiliar. Simply notice it. Be kind with yourself and each other as we hold everything today with loving curiosity, compassion, and openness. So today we're very blessed to hear from three different faith leaders: Reverend Dr. Bethany Nelson from Westminster Presbyterian Church, Shri Sidharth Kaw from North Bay Hindu Center, and Rabbi Susan Leider from my dear Congregation Kol Shofar. So I'm going to introduce each speaker. I'll act as timekeepers, so there's no need for them or us to be anxious. So I'd like all of you just to enjoy, relax, and just receive from our three speakers today from our community. So we'll begin with our first speaker, Reverend Dr. Bethany Nelson, who currently serves right down the street as the associate pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Tiburon. She's been in that role for 8 years, and prior to that was the director of the ministry at Westminster for 11 years. She's also a past board member of MIC and a past board president, who's an amazing board president as well. In her free time, Bethany enjoys spending time with her family, spouse Ken, and teenage son Ben. We're so thrilled to have Bethany here with us today. Thank you, Bethany.
How many times I've been to this prayer breakfast and sat there? It's hard to be up here. So it is such a joy to be here with you. And I have to say, when Scott told me that our theme today was reunited, I will admit that the first thing that came into my mind was nothing theological at all. Instead, it was that song from the 70s. Feels so good. Sounds like that's the first thing that came into a lot of people's minds. That's actually the only line of that song that I know. But for today's purposes, that's all I really need to know, right? Because look at us, we're here, we're reunited, and it does feel so good. We've heard it said already, our first in-person prayer breakfast since 2019, which is almost hard to wrap our brains around. It feels good. And I think of all the things that we're beginning to be able to do again, together, in person, and it feels good. And it feels good because we are people meant to be in community. We're meant to be in relationship with one another. And I think about my own Christian tradition. And I'm reminded that one of the very first things that Jesus does as he begins his public ministry is that he invites others to join him. He knows that the road ahead is going to be a hard one, and he knows that he doesn't want to travel that road alone. So he goes out and he calls 12 people to be his disciples, to be with him in community. Now, this is not to say that everything goes smoothly or everything is hunky-dory with Jesus and his disciples. Though it feels good to be reunited, though it feels good to be together in community, we know that being together is not without its challenges too, right? We are different people with different thoughts and different ideas. We're going to disagree. We're going to argue. We're not going to get along all the time. And Jesus himself got frustrated, got angry, got impatient with his disciples very regularly. But he stays in relationship with them. He continues to hold that community that he has formed together because he knows how important it is. And not just with those 12. Jesus also brings into his community lots of other people. especially those who are outcasts, those who are looked down on, those who are on the margins of society, those considered unimportant. You know, people like women and children, the sick, the poor, even the hated tax collectors. Jesus continues to draw his circle wider and wider and wider to make sure that everyone is included. And he wants to make sure no one is left out. So as we begin to be reunited following this time of isolation, it really is a golden opportunity to make sure that we too are drawing our circles wider and wider and wider. Now, who might be unintentionally left out of our community? Who do we need to intentionally include? You know, as we are reunited, this is an opportunity for our communities to maybe look different than they did before. They can be more welcoming, more inclusive, more loving than they ever have before. So one of the traditions in the Christian tradition that involves community that is very important for me, one of the traditions that I really missed the most during the pandemic is the celebration of communion, of the Lord's Supper. And for those not familiar with this tradition, this is when we as a Christian community remember Jesus' last meal with his disciples. It's a meal that he shared even with the person that he knew was about to betray him to the authorities. So we break bread, we share the cup, and we remember God's unconditional love for each one of us. Now, this is a celebration that is definitely meant to be done in community. But Jesus didn't go off and have his last meal by himself. He shared it with his 12 disciples. So I will say, during the pandemic, trying to recreate this sacrament of communion over Zoom was, I'll just say, it was less than satisfying. I'm sure many of you probably experienced the same thing, but communion is such an important part of the Christian tradition that we continue to share the meal even while physically apart. Now, communion is celebrated very differently in different Christian communities. But at Westminster, one of the most important parts for me is the invitation that we offer right at the beginning of the meal. Every time we celebrate communion at Westminster, we say something like this. We say, all are welcome. All are invited to the table. No one is turned away. There is room here. There is a place here for everyone. Some of you may be familiar with Sarah Miles. She's a part of St. Gregory's Episcopal Church in San Francisco, and she wrote this memoir called Take This Bread. And in the memoir, she describes very movingly her first experiences with communion, which actually didn't happen until she was an adult. This is some of what she says. She says that this feast shows us how to remember what has been dismembered by human attempts to separate and divide, to judge and cast out, to select or punish. At the table, she says, sharing food, we are brought into the ongoing work of making creation whole. I guess you could say at the table, we are reunited. So she joined St. Gregory for the first time as an adult, the first time she'd ever been a part of a church community, because she said she wanted to be devoted to something that is rooted in the most ordinary yet subversive practice. A dinner table where everyone is welcome, where the despised and the outcasts are honored. So that is why we in the Westminster community continued to share communion over Zoom, as unsatisfying as that was, because it was a reminder every time we shared that meal to draw our circles wider. That's why even when we returned to worshiping in person, we found ways that we could share the meal without everyone having to touch the bread at the same time or share the same cup. We ended up using these little single serve convenient things. Oh, I tell you what. First of all, they're impossible to get into.
Right.
Second, they're loud. Imagine a sanctuary filled with people with this noise happening. It kind of takes away from the sacredness of the moment. But we worship you because it was important. It is important to taste and see together God's love for all. So I want to share a song with you. Scott encouraged us to share the important parts of our spiritual practices, and for me, that's music. It's called Taste and See. It's actually written by a pastor friend of mine, who is a UCC pastor in Iowa named Rob Leider. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good, God is good. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good. To those who search, to those who mourn, to those who seek a place to lay the burdens borne. Come in and rest, come be made whole. Come in and feast among the gifts of love, with welcome to us all. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good, God is good. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good. For those who trust, for those who doubt, for those whose difference others use to cast them out. The table is set, the circle's wide, the banquet doors are open, welcoming everyone inside. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good, God is good. Taste and see, taste and see, God is good, God is good.
Yeah.
Even though communion is definitely a Christian tradition, I'm reminded whenever I am at the Lord's table of God's extravagant welcome of and love for all people. Every person, full stop, no exceptions or asterisks. So at Westminster, I am blessed to work with an amazing group of people. One of whom is here today, Jeff Schenkel's right there. He is our director of youth ministry. And as we've been moving out of the pandemic times, as we have been reuniting, Jeff has done the important job of reminding us adults of the long-term and the lasting implication of this pandemic on our young people. Now, the 2 years of relative isolation is not something that they will necessarily bounce back from or recover from quickly or easily. And I was especially reminded of this as Jeff and I gathered with our high school confirmation class earlier this year. So they had been tasked with planning and leading a worship service at Westminster. And it was back in March, I think. And so we met with them to discuss what theme they wanted to focus on as part of worship. And so we thought about it for a while, and then the first thing out of their mouths, not one of them, but several of them, was food. I kid you not, they wanted to craft an entire worship service along the theme of food. So we encouraged encouraged them to share a little more detail about what exactly they were thinking with that. And what rose to the surface was the importance for them of sharing food with others. You know, during the entirety of the pandemic, they basically had only had the opportunity to share meals with their family. And so, as the pandemic restrictions were easing, it was such a joy for them to do things like eat lunch with their friends at school, right? Share snacks with their friends after Sunday worship. Even go to a restaurant and maybe meet someone new at the next table over. And so in crafting a worship service around food, what they were really doing was lifting up again the importance of community. It was important for them to be together with other people, and they had not had the opportunity to do that in a long time. Finally, they were reunited, and it felt so good, and they wanted to share that joy in worship with everyone else. So as part of the confirmation process, one of our high school freshmen wrote a brief reflection about the importance of community to his life of faith. And I wanted to share some of his words with you today. Again, high school freshman. So he says, as a teenager, religion can feel confusing. I'm growing into my own person and challenging the assumptions I grew up with. But the relationships I have built within the youth group and through prayer feel authentic and enduring to me. This is why, for me, faith is a commitment to friendship, kindness, and community, to showing up for others and with others. I have always gone to church because of the amazing community we have here at Westminster, not because of the churchy stuff. Not because of the churchy stuff. Through Westminster, I have created meaningful bonds with all of the youth group members and with many other members of the church. The community and friendships are a better example of my faith than any sermon or Bible story. Because that's where I find God, in the happy memories, in the community, in the time spent with my friends. So other than making me question all of the hours I have put into writing those sermons, this is a powerful testimony, right? Where does he find God? In community, in relationships, in the care and the kindness and the love that we share with one another. So as we are reunited, may we also be united in love. I want to share just one more brief song with you. This one is straight from the Presbyterian hymnal. I'm wondering if anyone from First Christ Stand and Summer is here. Is that Scott somewhere? Yeah, okay. So excellent. So this song was actually commissioned by the First Christ Stand and Summer Church in 1996. It was to celebrate their centennial. But it made its way into the Presbyterian hymnal. Now it's sung by Presbyterian churches across the country. And what really calls to me about this song is the lyrics. I think they're really appropriate for our time together today. I'm not wrong. I think the motto of your church is "Together We Serve." Is that right? Yeah, there we go. So the title of this hymn is "Together We Serve." Together we serve, united by love, inviting God's world to the glorious peace. We work and we pray through sorrow and joy, extending God's love to the last and the least. We seek to become a beacon of hope, a lamp for the heart and a light for the feet. We learn year by year to let love shine through our head until we see God in each person we meet. We welcome the star, the wealthy, the poor,
Thank you so much, Bethany.
Amen.
So our second speaker today is Shri Sidharth Kaw, who lives and practices Sanatana Dharma, which is Hinduism, with an emphasis on applying the philosophy of Vedanta, that is the universal philosophy in Vedas, to our daily lives. Sidharth has served as a teacher and community member in various capacities for Shemaya Mission in Bay Area and Cleveland, and currently serves as a community member for the North Bay Hindu Center. He's been actively involved in our MIC Contemplation and Action Group, and has led meditations and vigils at MIC. A major theme of his interfaith dialogue stems from his community's experience, which highlights that supremacy is not just a problem of race, but a great one for gender and religion as well. Ultimately, Sidharth seeks to enrich everyone with the knowledge of Sanatana Dharma, which he strongly believes applies philosophically to all women and men of every color and creed. Please welcome Sidharth Kaw.
So Reverend Scott mentioned turning the sun on or knots, and I think that's where I come into play here. Hello again, my name is Sidharth Kaw. I cannot say that I'm a religious leader, like my fellow speakers here. While I do serve on the committee of the North Bay Hindu Center, I'm speaking to you this morning as a layman. I'm a father to 3 beautiful biracial children who are being raised in both the Catholic and Hindu faith systems. A husband to a loving Filipino Catholic wife, and the son of 2 Hindu immigrants from the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. I want to share more about my family's background with you, but let's pause to remember how I got here. We are all gathered here today for the first time since that pandemic started 2 years ago, or in my case, the first time ever with MIC in person. Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020. My introduction to MIC came when the president of NBHC, Rabbi Susan Leider, reached out to Reverend Scott Cohen with a suggestion of having an online event with speakers from different faiths talking about how we can all work together with an emphasis on racial tolerance and strengthening diversity. It was 9 days after George Floyd had been murdered in broad daylight. America was scrambling to understand how a post-racial, post-Barack Obama world could result in the reality that was the streets of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I want you to remember this sentence, so I'll emphasize it again. America was scrambling to understand how a post-racial, post-Barack Obama world could result in the reality that was the streets of Minneapolis, Minnesota. What followed was my introduction to the Zoom life of MIC, beginning with the Marin faith leader's response to racial injustice on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. A long discussion occurred, notably not including Marin's Black faith leadership, but I will paraphrase action items shared by Reverend Quinn. A bolder showing of solidarity across faith communities and faith traditions. White people do their personal work on white privilege, implicit bias, and systemic racism. Name the systemic racism that happens right here in Marin County. Be witnesses, show up at community gatherings and at civic meetings, and publicly question assumptions rooted in white privilege. Ask Black leaders for their feedback. In response, this was part of my email back to Reverend Quinn on Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Hi, Reverend Scott. Thank you for organizing and putting this summary together. I want to point out that the personal work you mentioned is not limited to white people. Racism exists in different forms across all communities. So I would suggest you change the note to say, do your personal work as it relates to your own racial community, including privilege, implicit bias, and systemic racism. Also, when you ask Black leaders for their feedback, when you say white leaders or white allies, I would say white and person of color leaders and white and person of color allies. Understood that we're predominantly talking about a white Christian population and leadership in Marin, but thought it may be worth making that addition. What followed was my involvement with MIC's racial justice group and contemplation and action group. My feeling the need to reach out to local Black faith leaders and civic leaders followed that, and thus began many conversations about many interesting topics over time. So why am I sharing all this with you, especially at prayer breakfast? Well, ever since Reverend Quinn reached out to me about speaking today, I have thought long and hard about what I would say today, even before the theme was set. For 2 months, I had many reflections that I could only describe in the context of getting them off my chest. Then I learned the theme, reunited. And while I could play the part and stick to the scripture and teachings that discuss positive messages around our common divinity, which I promise I will get to, I could not help but think about my personal reality. I could not help but think about the discussions that took place after George Floyd died. I could not help but think about history conveniently repeating itself again. I am a Kashmiri Hindu. The land where my family comes from, where my ancestors are from, is the Kashmir Valley. Kashmir has a chronicle history that goes back to the 3rd millennium BC, and an ancient history that stretches even further back from there. The religion we now call Hinduism, or I prefer calling Sanatana Dharma, was well established until the influx of Buddhism around the time of Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. However, given the close relationship between Buddhism and Sanatana Dharma, there was some synchrony that occurred through what was considered a golden age of religious thought, debate, and exchange. Eventually, Buddhism made its way to Tibet and over to China and the rest of Asia. At home, Sanatana Dharma took hold with the emergence of Kashmir Shaivism. Unfortunately, this interplay of dharmic philosophies and practices came into conflict with the post-Crusades boomerang of Islamic conquest into the Kashmir Valley beginning in the 14th century. Thus began a 6th century long clash of Islamic proselytizing with Hindus in Kashmir that resulted in 7 exoduses of Kashmiri Hindus starting in 1389, and with the most recent being in 1989, affecting my direct family members. The threats from terrorists on the doors of my family, along with the targeted murders of community members and mosque loudspeakers demanding that Hindus convert, die, or run away, culminated with most Hindus moving to the neighboring Jammu region or elsewhere in India. And I would be remiss not to mention that Kashmiri Muslims have also suffered, especially since this moment in time and since then. So the first thought I have when I hear reunited, especially in the context of interfaith, isn't positive. It is actually a question. And that question is, how am I supposed to feel unity given the nature of our one-sided, brutal 6th century reality? A reality that is denied by some to this day, a reality that is hidden from today's younger generation and whitewashed among civic leaders. Think about that. We all had the same ancestors less than a millennium ago. And over the course of 6 centuries, hatred in the name of religion has resulted in the finality of a genocide, both in demographics and in spirit. It's tough to mention, I'm sure it's tough to hear, but this is real life with a very real history. So how am I supposed to feel unity given my religious background? Back to Thursday, June 11th, 2020. The reality of a discussion on race in Marin County is that there is a serious mistrust between the historical Black community of Marin City and the rest of the county. In fact, in June of 2021, a study on Marin's lack of racial integration called The Roots of Structural Racism Project was released by the Othering and Belonging Institute, including an interactive map based on census data from 1980 to 2019. The results? San Rafael's Canal neighborhood, Marin City, and San Quentin have the highest concentration of Black and Latino people compared to the rest of the county. In fact, Marin City is not even considered an integrated community. And I quote from lead researcher Stephen Menengian: there are a few cities nationally that are fully integrated, but almost every city has 1 or 2 integrated tracts. It's very unusual to have a county that is almost entirely segregated. That's the case in Marin. This is last year. As you know, Marin City was home to World War II shipyard workers with the first integrated federal housing projects. But while white people were allowed to purchase homes elsewhere in the county, it was impossible for the Black community to do so because of redlining, racial covenants on homes, and racist real estate agents. The rest is history. They try to tell us that we live in a post-racial world, especially with the election of President Obama, a biracial man with, as he said, a funny name. But we know the truth. And if you didn't, you sure know now. This general story was relayed to me by Black faith and civic leaders in private. They told me what to do, get educated, and then get involved in the institution with systemic racism, the County of Marin. Not my words, what they told me. Why? So they could see a difference in what they cared about, which was education, housing, and jobs. Have we made progress? I don't know. So how am I supposed to feel unity given the racial disparity our county still feels? How? When Reverend Quinn asked me to talk about being reunited, I had to ask, reunited for whom? Reunited for what? Reunited where? Reunited why? When were we united? How do I take all of these questions and seek answers? I think the answer to unity comes after acknowledging reality. Not just one person's reality or one community's reality, all of it. By definition, for all of us to function as an interfaith community, there must be respect for one another, room for open communication within a safe space. Supremacy is not beholden to race alone. Supremacy rears its ugly head in the form of religion, as I personally shared with you. Supremacy rears its ugly head in the form of gender discrimination, sexism, classism, just to name a few, but back to interfaith. We can only function as an interfaith community once we drop this notion that my faith is supreme to yours, or vice versa. Of the doctrine of my particular faith, that I must convert you by any means necessary. Interfaith must imply universal values that apply across the board, and we must call out anywhere this does not hold true. In my case, Sanatana Dharma is a pluralistic entity with thousands of deities that symbolically represent natural forces in addition to virtues and values, with philosophical debate at its heart and a rich diversity in its ancient history. But it is easy to get stuck in the weeds, and there are a lot of problems within our religion as well. People can debate how one particular philosophy is better than another, but if you truly study the scriptures, you will realize that the prescription for each individual is unique to that individual within my faith. There is not one way or one path for a seeker for Hinduism. Rather, there is a unique path for each seeker. I will share with you the full day one speech by the individual who brought Sanatana Dharma to the Americas and established the first Hindu temple in the Americas, right here in San Francisco's Vedanta Society. His name is Swami Vivekananda. September 11, 1893, at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Sisters and brothers of America, it fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warm and cordial welcome which you have given us. I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks of the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions. I thank you in the name of the millions and millions of Hindu people of classes, all classes and sects. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of earth. I'm proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnants of the Israelites, who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which the Holy Temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I'm proud to belong to a religion which is sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. As the different streams, having their sources in different places, all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant fanaticism have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time is come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with a sword or with a pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. How am I supposed to feel unity? I remember Vivekananda's message over a century ago, and how it applies to all peoples of all ages. I remind myself that Vedanta, the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma that I live by, is considered a universal philosophy that can be applied to any religion. Even if our relationship with the divine is described in personal terms via Jesus or Buddha, or in the case of Hinduism, with any number of deities, in its absolute form, what we in the West call God has no attributes. The different streams, their source, and their final stop are all water. So too, within the diversity of Hinduism lies the core belief that all things have their source in one divine truth. I feel unity when we collectively decide to acknowledge acts of disunity and ensure justice occurs. I feel unity when I look at past faith leaders who were universal in thought and forward-thinking visionaries. I feel unity when I look at my own family, my wife, and 3 children, interracial and interfaith family. So let us acknowledge all wrongs from the past, provide justice where needed, and ring the bell that ushers in the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with a sword or with a pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. Let us truly unite. I leave you with 2 prayers. The first is from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 7. Yoga yukta vishuddhatma vichitatma jitendriya sarva bhutatma bhutatma purvan api nalipyate. The karma yogis, or practitioners of selfless action, or of purified intellect, and who control the mind and senses, see the soul of all souls in every living being. Though performing all kinds of actions, they are never entangled. And the final prayer is a peace prayer or Shanti mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may all be happy. May all be free from illness. May all see what is auspicious. May no one suffer. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you, and Hari Om.
Thank you so much. Our final speaker today is Rabbi Susan Leider, who is a leading West Coast voice in the Jewish and multi-faith community, bringing warmth, joy, and connection to right here, Congregation Kol Shofar in Tiburon and beyond. At Kol Shofar, she is the first woman to hold a senior rabbinic position at a Northern California conservative congregation. She is also the first woman to serve as associate rabbi at Temple Beth Am, a historic conservative Los Angeles synagogue. She currently serves as the executive on the executive council of the Rabbinical Assembly and is a member of the Clergy Council of Roots, a unique network of Palestinians and Israelis who see each other as challenging the assumptions about each other, build trust, and create a new discourse around conflict. She has served on the executive committee of the Board of Rabbis of Northern California and on the board of the Marin Interfaith Council, where she helped to found Loveless Marin. She has served on the board of the Industrial Heirs Foundation, the nation's largest network of local faith and community-based organizations, many of which are here in this room, responding to seemingly intractable problems and overcoming racial, religious, and socioeconomic divisions. So we at the Marin Interfaith Council are so grateful to you, Susan, for your wise, inspiring, encouraging, graceful presence in our board and in our community. Thank you for all you've done, and much love and blessings to you as we go on a new adventure soon. We send you all of our love and thank you, for who you are, and for being with us.
I was so grateful to Scott when I turned to him today and I said, Scott, no one else is doing any meditation this morning, are they? And he said, no. So I want to shift the order a little bit of what I want to do in light of the flow of sacred words that have come up to this point from Bethany and from Sidharth, and to give ourselves at least 2 minutes to just let these words sink into our souls, sink into our breath. And so I'm actually going to take my seat in a minute too with you for this. But let's unify, if we can, our breath in this space, in this moment, in this room. And just to let the words wash over us. And then we can reopen our hearts again to receive a little bit. Jewish tradition offers several blessings for a moment like this. One is the Shehatim blessing, a blessing we say each time, usually each year,
when we do something new. And so I think we're overdue for this blessing, given that the last time we assembled was 2 full years ago. So I refer you to a little handout on your table there, and I'm grateful to Becky for playing the part for this beautiful melody, beautiful blessing here, which I included in the traditional Hebrew and the transliterated Hebrew, and then there is an English translation as well. And so we'll be singing it in the Hebrew, so I encourage you to please follow along in the transliteration if you like, feel comfortable singing along, that would be beautiful. And if you want to just let it wash over you and be in the moment, that is just fine too.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו בזמן הזה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו בזמן הזה.
Blessed are you, eternal Spirit, who has given us life, sustained us, and allowed us to arrive in this moment. We say, Amen. So there's another traditional Jewish blessing that one says, upon seeing a friend that you haven't seen in a year. Now, this blessing, or the intent behind this blessing, could be taken more literally in some religious traditions than others. But it's also a poignant blessing for us to say, when we know just how many people have died from COVID. Yet, this blessing in Jewish tradition is deepest for us when it is metaphorical. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, the one who sees a friend after a year says, blessed are you, eternal Spirit, who causes the dead to live again. Because when we have gone so long without seeing each other in person on a regular, sustained basis, with the gentle rhythms of our gathering and meeting, it can indeed feel like we are coming back to life. Okay, to be real, like for some of us, it's getting dressed again, packing lunches to try to go to the office, or for our children to go to school, seeing each other's bottom halves, like tights, boots, skirt. These are things, and recalibrating our energy for in-person social engagement, which for some people is far more taxing than others. In the Hebrew, the word for together is yachad, and it comes from the word echad, meaning one. It strikes me as curious that the same word for setting oneself apart, l'hijached, is actually the same word for being united. Isn't that curious? The same word that describes our separating ourselves from each other to save lives is yet the same powerful word that describes our being together today. Unity is the Jewish mystical ideal. Yichud is that word, another form of the same Hebrew word echad, meaning one. The Jewish mystics teach that our spiritual goal is spiritual unity, to view the world and each other as not the same as each other, but inextricably connected. Yes, but how do we keep this in our souls day in and day out? As we face the many forces in the world that would have us believe that we are separate from each other. As I think about the arc of this pandemic and what transpired between life as we once knew it before March of 2020, and the reuniting that is beginning to happen now, I remember significant personal, spiritual peaks and valleys, moments that continue to teach me that we are not separate from each other. And whatever joys and pains we experience in life should eventually become vehicles for unity, not for separation. Remember back to March of 2020? I remember that moment when I truly realized we are physically closing the synagogue. Unbelievably, we began our seemingly endless shelter in place. At the beginning of the pandemic, my first enduring response was, we are tough, we are going to get through this. I reasoned with myself, other people have it much worse, this is our time to persevere. But in trying to make the best of everything, I buried my COVID losses. I didn't mean to, it just happened. It was a seemingly harmless coping mechanism. And that worked kind of until my back went out. So in pandemic tape 2, I tried this approach. Okay, this is really not great, even though I have unbelievable privilege, nourishing food, solid shelter, and good health. I can still name and acknowledge the struggle. I worked hard to develop my spiritual capacity to hold both life and loss, joy and sadness together at the same time. In other words, these things are not separate from each other. We can hold both extremes. And my broken but healed back and my open heart also knew joy during COVID. Defying all odds, my daughter Sarah was married October 18th, 2020, on her originally planned wedding date, 30 years and 6 months to the day that my husband Jeff and I were married. We reluctantly reduced guest lists from the hundreds to the tens, uninvited many loved ones, cut the dancing from the reception and streamed to the wedding. They ordered fancy navy blue surgical masks with gold embossed letters that said, "Quarantined for life." Outdoors and socially distanced it was, with no dancing, but for us, it was a true miracle. And I'm so grateful to have celebrated in the way that we could. As I reflect on the spiritual valleys, I remember back to when my mother, Nancy, went into hospice last summer. Experiencing my mom being on hospice meant that I needed to hold death lightly and closely without clear expectation of what the future would bring. During our Rosh Hashanah New Year's services last year, I spoke about this tough experience, as I truly expected her to die within weeks. But miraculously, my mom came out of hospice, transferred into assisted living after the holidays, and on June 4th, we look forward to celebrating her 89th birthday. And that bride from October of 2020, Sarah Rose Cardos, gave birth in September to a beautiful baby girl, Nora Sage Cardos, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement in the Jewish calendar. My first grandchild, a key moment of joy in my life and in the life of our family. And on this May 11th, today, I stand on the cusp of a whole new post-pandemic adventure. After 10 years of being here at Kol Shofar, I will take my leave of this role as senior rabbi in this community. And what will the future bring? I do not yet know, but I feel a well of gratitude for the deep and profound experiences I've had in this sacred community. And I also hold a curiosity for the future to unfold in the months ahead. And so today, I hold both the reality of being reunited with you all, with the reality of my pursuing a new life path. Yet we know that true spiritual separation is an illusion. We are all connected. Some of us share memories from previous years here together. For others, this is our first shared experience together today. But we will always be connected through time and space, having shared this beautiful morning together, and to have known the true joy of being reunited, at least in this small moment. In the words of the book of Exodus, we are today panim of panim, face to face, as Moses was with the divine. There truly is no greater gift. And so I close with another famous blessing, the priestly blessing drawn from the book of Numbers. May you be blessed. May you be safe. May you be luminous and shine light out into the world. May you know happiness and may you feel peace. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Leider. One more round of applause for all of us. So in just a few minutes, we'll have a brief closing, but I want to provide you a few minutes at your table to talk to someone next to you about what you heard today. Something that inspired you, something that challenged you, something that surprised you, something you learned. Just take a moment, let's have a moment of silence, just reflect on what's one thing that's particularly present for you right now after hearing our three speakers. Now let's spend a few minutes talking to someone else. Can you get your wrapped up for your conversation, please? So thank you again for being with us today. Thank you for our amazing speakers, Bethany, Shri, Susan. Thank you so much for being with us. On your table, a few things, if you haven't already noticed, there's a postcard about the levels we're in. Just feel free to take that with you. If you're not already signed up for our e-newsletter, the sign-up sheet is on the table. And if you want to make a donation to the MIC today, I don't know if you already did, but if you wish to make one, we have a donation envelope, you can drop it off with Esmeralda on your way out, or there's the QR code for those of you who love the smartphones. Also wanted to remind you just of one thing we have coming up. So we have a monthly interfaith meditation. It's always at 5:30 p.m., always on the second Wednesday. So the next one will be on June 8th, and these are via Zoom. Again, this will come out in the newsletter. And Reverend C.J. Denver from the Buddhist Temple of Marin will be leading that for us. So please feel free to. And for those of you who are religious leaders, however that's defined in your community, join us on Wednesday, June 22nd at St. Francis of Assisi's Outdoor Chapel in the motto at 12:30 p.m. for our next religious leaders gathering. There'll be more information coming out about that. On your calendar now. Please join us for all these things and more as together we celebrate faith, advocate justice, and build community. We've heard such deep, beautiful sharing today. You've had beautiful sharing at your table. This is something you can take with you. I invite you to hold this in your heart today, to lean into what's one next action step that you can do from this place that you know today in your heart and your being. Thank you for being the Marin Interfaith Council, because you are the Marin Interfaith Council in our community. Thank you for making our world more whole by being here, by the work you do, by who you are. So we're going to close today with a song. So I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Bethany Nelson to close.
I am one voice and I am singing. I am one voice and I am singing. I am one voice and I am singing. I am not alone. We are two voices, we are singing. We are two voices, we are singing. We are two voices, we are singing. We are not alone. Let's join in 100 voices. We are 100 voices singing. We are 100 voices singing. We are 100 voices singing. We are not alone. And it grows to 1,000 voices. We are 1,000 voices singing. We are 1,000 voices singing. We are 1,000 voices singing. We are not alone. And why not 1,000,000 voices? We are 1,000,000 voices singing. We are 1,000,000 voices singing. We are 1,000,000 voices singing. We are not alone. I am one voice and I'll keep singing. I am one voice and I'll keep singing. I am one voice in peace.
Thank you.